Welcome on over to another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. I'm your host, Matt Tardio. Today's episode is being sponsored by EveryPlate. Now, this might not be a day that lives in infamy, but I'm telling you right now, it is going to be celebrated in Israel for a very long time to come. Today, we got confirmation that Yahweh Sinwar is dead. Not only is he dead, we got DNA evidence on him, 99% match, fingerprints match, dental records match. He's dead. And in today's episode, we are going to be detailing literally the last minutes of his life. You're going to see exactly what he looked like and the sorry state that he was in. And as everybody had hoped for, yeah, he knew it was coming. And it looks like he was suffering pretty bad. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to bring you over to a statement by Benjamin Netanyahu.
1 year ago, Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist chief of Hamas, launched the October 7th massacre against Israel. It was the bloodiest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It was the worst attack on the Jewish state since the founding of Israel. Sinwar's terrorists murdered in cold blood 1,200 people. That's elderly people, Holocaust survivors, children. They brutally raped women. They beheaded men. They burnt babies alive. And they took some 250 men, 251 women, men, and children hostage to the dungeons of Gaza. Today, the mastermind of this day of sheer evil is no more. Yahya Sinwar is dead. He was killed in Rafah by the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end. To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. Hamas is holding 101 hostages in Gaza, who are citizens of 23 countries, citizens of Israel, but citizens of many other countries. Israel is committed to doing everything in our power to bring all of them home. And Israel will guarantee the safety of all those who return our hostages. But to those who would harm our hostages, I have another message. Israel will hunt you down and bring you to justice. I also have a message of hope to the peoples of the region. The axis of terror that was built by Iran is collapsing before our eyes. Nasrallah is gone. His deputy Muhsin is gone. Haniyeh is gone. Def is gone. Sinwar is gone. The reign of terror that the Iranian regime has imposed on its own people and on the peoples of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, this too will come to an end. All those who seek a future of prosperity and peace in the Middle East should unite to build a better future. Together, we can push back the forces of darkness and create a future of light and hope for all of us.
Some very profound statements coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, coming in really, really strong on Sinwar being dead. Well, how exactly did it all go down and where did it go down? Let's get into it. For those of you not familiar with the region, what you're looking at is a chunk of the Mideast. We've got Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, where the war is currently raging on as well. And then as we start zooming in on the southwestern corner where it meets up with the Sinai Peninsula and the Egyptian border, as you get closer, you come to the town of Rafah. In that pin right there in the middle of the screen, as we start getting closer, this is where he lost his life, in this building right here. Now, as great as it is that we're able to zoom in and see exactly where that's at, the other thing that we actually have is photographs from the ground of where he lost his life. Here you can see how his location ended up getting geolocated based off of all of these different images. Everything you see here is what the surrounding area is, and that is how it was able to get located. Now, the craziest part about this entire ordeal is it wasn't a special operations raid that ended up taking him out. It wasn't, any wild intel that ended up going into it. No, he literally got spotted in a building and the soldiers opened fire on him. Obviously, they suspected him to be a militant. No word on if they saw firearms on him, how they ended up identifying him. But in his death photos, it's very clear that he was dressed as if he was a jihadist terrorist, and they shot at him accordingly. Later in the day, the IDF ended up observing 3 fighters that were attempting to move in a very stealthy manner. 2 of them split and went into a building, and one of them split and went into a separate building. Now, that one that happened to go into the separate building, that was Sinwar himself. He went from the first floor up to the second floor, and that is when a drone ended up getting flown into the building. They then engaged in direct gunfire with them until a tank approached. Once the tank got on scene, it fired on the building, and Bob's your uncle. Now, they just took this as a regular firefight engagement for inside of Gaza, which, quite truthfully, it does happen quite a bit over there. But the next morning, when they walked into the building, they were shocked to discover that it wasn't any terrorists running around inside Rafah. It was Yahweh Sinwar. And we started to get pictures coming out right away. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the drone footage of what they saw when they flew the drone into the building before the engagement. And this is the video that they saw when Sinwar had gone into that second floor before another gunfight had broke out and before the tank actually ended up showing up. Story is a little bit unclear about when the separate firefights took place, but it's good enough that we know that he was spotted. There was a firefight. 2 other insurgents ended up getting spotted moving with him. As they open up on them, they split, go into these separate buildings. He goes upstairs, and this is what they end up seeing on the drone. Drone flies into the building, looking around, and right there, ladies and gentlemen, right there in that chair is Yahweh Sinwar. They had no idea that was him, but wouldn't you know it, clear as a bell, it ends up being him in the aftermath. And in this image, you can actually see his arm is wounded. Now, it is a little bit distorted because of the drone imagery, but his arm is definitely wounded there. Here you see him actually picking up a stick because he's a little bit pissed off. I think he knows his end time is coming. Once you reach that point and you have a stick in your hand to throw at a drone, I think you just kind of, I don't know. I feel like you're at the end of your rope. I'd like to think that's what's going through his head at this time as he just haphazardly lobs that stick at him. Now, the nice thing about this, when we look at it, I know some people are like, oh, he just got wounded in the arm. Maybe it wasn't that bad, but you got to understand some of these arm wounds, I've seen people actually lose their lives because of this. When they end up getting wounded in the arm, those bullets actually travel up your arm. Sometimes they'll ride right up the bone and rip those arteries apart. And I know from the aftermath, from looking at the photos of the aftermath, and it's unclear whether or not he had already put it on his arm, but he did have a makeshift tourniquet attached to his arm when they found him. And it looks like from this imagery, just above his arm might be that same tourniquet that's attached to it. It's not your typical like Cat 3 tourniquet or anything like that. No. It was just a piece of wire that he had wrapped around in an attempt to slow down the blood. And it must have worked because, I mean, truthfully, the guy was still alive. When the soldiers went inside that building the next day, they came across a lot of stuff. Most notably, this is what they ended up seeing. And now I'm going to have his face blurred out for you guys just because YouTube's going to give me a hard. Back into the busy season and let Every Plate save you time and money with $2.99 meals. Juggling a busy schedule? Save yourself a trip to the grocery store and grab and go snacks and easy to assemble lunches to your weekly box. Give your budget a break this fall with affordable recipes from America's Best Value Meal Kit. Join Every Plate today and pay only $2.99 per meal, plus get 50% off your first box for all box sizes. Get this amazing deal by going to everyplate.com/podcast and entering code 49ROB. That's code 49ROB at everyplate.com/podcast. Hard time. But that's what they ended up seeing when they come up. Had a massive wound on his forehead, body sticking out of the rubble. He's got his LBV still attached to him. That's it. That's what they ended up finding. And the soldiers kind of stopped and they looked at it and they're like, dude, is that Sinwar? Now I want you to imagine this. This is like literally just young troops on the ground, a couple days in combat, end up shooting up a couple dudes at night, probably feeling pretty good about themselves, walk in the building and they're freaking pooped their pants because this destroyed demon laying in the rubble is that of Yahweh Sinwar. Now, notably, something else that was on Sinwar's body was this right here. This is a pistol. Now, this pistol got taken off of an officer. I believe it was back in 2018. Let me check on that. Yeah, 2018, and it belonged to a Lieutenant Colonel M. He was a senior officer from the Special Operations Division in the Intelligence Directorate who was killed during an operation in Gaza all the way back in 2018. Now, finding that pistol within itself is kind of random, but I would expect it to be on him. But the other crazy stuff that ended up being on Sinwar's body, well, ladies and gentlemen, you're about to see it. They also had passports. Now, this passport allegedly belongs to one of the other two gentlemen that was moving with him, and it shows that he was an UNRWA teacher. Now, I've heard a lot of rumors that the passports and stuff that they ended up having on him were a lot of fakes. In addition to the passports, they also had a bunch of cash. Now, if they ended up having a bunch of cash on them and they were carrying passports and they were running by threes through Rafah, it kind of makes you wonder whether or not that they were actually going to attempt to flee and run out of the country. Now, here we look at the weapons array that was found over near him. You can see it all laid out down there on the ground. Interesting enough, something that you cannot really make out that well, but it's all the way down here at the bottom. There is another UNRWA ID or badge all the way down here at the bottom. So we've got passports, and then we also have UNRWA badges as well that identify them. Oddly enough, the weapon systems that they have with them are these old rotted out POS AKs with tape around them and these old boxes of ammo. Why do I think that's important to note? Because we are literally talking about the head of the organization. Anybody that's been in the military and has looked at weapon systems and things like that, they know, like, your senior level leadership gets a lot of the nicer stuff. It's just kind of how it goes down. But for some reason, Sinwar, that's not what he got. Sinwar got like some garbage. And let's say this wasn't Sinwar's gear because it's not really clear. We can definitely say that his bodyguards that were moving along with him were his best friends. They got issued garbage. Additionally, here's some other artifacts that ended up getting found on him. Now, these ones are said to be Sinwar's personal belongings that he had on his body. You can see a pack of Mentos, looks like some prayer beads, some Kleenexes because he's got that massive nose and those big Dumbo ears. He's got to wipe and clean all that crap out. And that really looks like it. And the one thing that looks kind of odd right here in the middle, and maybe somebody can tell me what that is. To me, it looks like a poker chip. And I don't know if that's a sign I have a gambling problem or if, I don't know, maybe Sinwar did go to Vegas. Hell. Now, a day of operations like this just wouldn't be complete inside of the military unless you had a full-on dog and pony show, and you better believe they had one. The chief of staff of the armed forces of Israel ended up showing up to the scene himself to survey the damage. There you can see him standing around, and this is what I'm talking about all your senior level. Those are all his like senior level peons. Look at how nice their weapon systems are, how brand new and clean they are. Their bodyguards have all the nice stuff. That's what I'm talking about. That's typically what you're going to end up seeing with people like this. So there they are showing him around the battlefield. Just absolutely phenomenal. I'm sure this is pretty crazy. I really want to know with these young soldiers what exactly they are going to end up receiving for an award, because I mean, let's be quite frank, they did a phenomenal job. Obviously they ended up taking out Sinwar, and I know this isn't a time to talk about awards or anything of that nature, but it reminds me of a story of one of my buddies ended up getting a certificate of achievement for Operation Anaconda. His entire squad ended up getting taken out, minus him and their saw gunner, while they were breaching a building. They ended up getting inside of the building, clearing the building, him and his other buddy that remained alive. And they did all of this as a E3 and an E4, by the way. Cleared out the building, drug all of their bodies outside, got their squad leader's radio set up and called in a medevac, set up their HLZ, had the medevac called in, loaded the bodies on the helicopter, and then linked up with an adjoining squad. For that, they ended up getting an Army Certificate of Achievement. Why? Because the Silver Star that they were put in for, they didn't have the rank to qualify it. And I'm really curious in this case if that's going to be something that the IDF actually does as well. The other question on everybody's mind is, how is Hezbollah and how is Iran going to respond to Sinwar being killed? The answer is we don't know. But it is very fair to say that with the statements that Benjamin Netanyahu just came out with, that it's likely, very, very likely, we're probably going to see some members of Hamas defecting. And why do I say that? Because in a letter that was discovered inside of Khan Yunis just a little over a month ago, we ended up seeing this letter was from a Hamas battalion commander to Sinwar himself. And that battalion commander had said that he had 25% of his troop strength left. 25% of them had defected, and that 50% were either KIA or WIA. Now, why is that important to remember? Because the Israeli Defense Force is likely going to use Sinwar's body as some sort of leverage in order to get some of those hostages back. I even heard today that they may be offering, how do I want to say this? Not clemency, but safe passage and money for the return of the hostages. So we know months ago that there was this hunger for Hamas in order to kind of run away from the battle. The other concern that a lot of people have is, look, if now we have the head of the snake cut off and nothing but a bunch of militants running around, what's going to become of the other hostages? And that is a very solid question. I think that's why Israel is going to do their very best to try and get them back via negotiations with Sinwar's body. But that would require a lot of trust, and I don't know if they would do that. I do believe that some of them would defect at this point, and my only concern is if they defect and they're holding on to the hostages' bodies, what they are going to do with the hostages if they're alive or dead, because we definitely want them recovered. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. It's a day of celebration. Sinwar's gone. Sinwar's dead, ladies and gentlemen. It feels good to say. I've been waiting a long time to say it, and I'm happy I finally got to do it. Peace, love, happiness, and God bless, ladies and gentlemen. I'm out of here.